The issue of my talk was supposed to be about global trends in homeland security, in cyber, but we are always constantly living here under the Chinese curse of living in interesting times, and the last 24 hours have been very interesting, I think, a bit too much interesting. So let's look at what is going on in Gaza. What would you like to hear, the good news or the real news? Let's look at what happened in the last 24 hours, and I believe we will be able to draw some lessons from it into your fields of HLS and cybersecurity. I know that Gaza is a very unique case. I don't think any other country is neighboring such a hostile entity like Gaza, and is facing a constant rocket fire from Gaza like we do. But I believe that there are similarities to the challenges that all of you, our guests, are facing in your own country. So a quick news flash, where are we at? Since yesterday at 4 o'clock, some 400 projectiles have been fired from Gaza into Israel. More than 100 of them were intercepted by our Iron Dome. The casualty toll on the Israeli side right now is 1 dead. Ironically, it's a Palestinian illegal worker that was killed last night in Ashkelon, and 54 injured. During the night, Israel struck several high-rises in Gaza and other Hamas targets, symbolic targets mostly. All of those targets were struck after given a warning for the people inside to evacuate them. So the casualty toll on the Palestinian side is 7 dead, disregarding the 7 dead from Sunday night. So how did we get there? Sunday night, we had a covert operation, such as are being done almost every night in every arena that you can imagine, in the Middle East and beyond the Middle East, in several continents. This is a routine. This is the war that Israel is engaged in the last few years. Those of you Israelis probably know the name, Mabam, the campaign between the war. The campaign between the wars is a covert operation, a constant, ongoing one that is meant to keep Israel's enemy constantly under attack, wherever they are, whether it's Lebanon, Gaza, Africa, Malaysia, Tunisia. You've seen the operation, you've heard about them from the things that were published in recent years. This one went bad. The force was detected. They barely made it out, and 7 Hamas operatives were killed. Hamas couldn't sustain that kind of blow and decided to respond yesterday with a coordinated attack against Israel. And my sense is that Hamas believes that this is something that could be contained. Look at the very delicate dialogue that Hamas is running vis-a-vis the Israeli government. Hamas has made it very clear that so far he hasn't fired beyond the region around Gaza. He hasn't fired on Ashdod, not on Beersheba, and not on Tel Aviv. But this would come, I believe, in the next few hours. So we'll see the ranges of the fire being expanding, going into Ashdod and Beersheba as well, and perhaps we'll get to Tel Aviv. Now, right now, our cabinet is being assembled. What are the options that our cabinet is being presented right now? Clearly, the IDF can present a full spectrum of operations, from a limited one into a full-scale war. But I believe that Hamas' assessment this morning is that Israel doesn't want to go to war, would try to contain this escalation for a few days, refrain from going in ground operations and mostly strike from the air, and Hamas believe they can take it. How did we get to this point? Why is this happening now? For that, we need to take a look at Gaza and what went down in Gaza in the last few years. Since the end of the last war, August 14, we had very unusual 43 months of almost complete calm around Gaza. How come? For 43 months, since August 14 to March 18, Hamas, the leading Palestinian terror organization, resistant movement, whatever you want to call them, Hamas hasn't fired a single bullet at Israel, let alone a rocket, for 43 months. How so? Hamas, since the last war, has lost the appetite for going into full-scale war with Israel. Don't get me wrong, you will not see contributions from Hamas to Bnei Brit next year. It won't happen. Hamas is and will be a bitter enemy of Israel. But Hamas, since the last war, is making that calculation, and I believe that this is the calculation they are still doing today. Let's assume I'm going for another conflict with Israel. Let's assume I'll be very successful. I'll come out of a tunnel, I'll surprise the Israelis, I'll kill Israelis, I'll grab live Israelis and bring them into Gaza, and my rockets will drive Iron Dome crazy, and I will shut down Ben Gurion Airport for 2 weeks, not 36 hours like in the recent war. Still, where do Hamas end that conflict? Another 5,000 dead in Gaza? Another 50,000 homeless? I haven't done building for the homeless from the recent round. And they lose the appetite to fight. And that's why Hamas has been seeking some kind of understandings with Israel since the end of the last war. But several developments have occurred since as well. First of all, Gaza import and export routes were all blocked. At the time when the previous Egyptian government was by the Muslim Brotherhood movement, led by Mohammed Morsi, Hamas and Gaza had an open import-export routes through the Sinai, underneath the ground, tunnels that they could bring in and take out everything that they wanted. When the government changed in Egypt and Abdel Fattah al-Sisi took power, he sealed the border. And Egyptian forces so far report, and I believe them, that they have detected and destroyed 1,800 tunnels underneath the border with Gaza, a 9 miles long border, 1,800 tunnels. I don't know what the border was standing on air. And I'm not talking about tunnels like you remember from the last war, those narrow ones that you can hardly walk through. I'm talking about wide tunnels that you can drive an SUV through because they were smuggling cars. Tunnels that had pipes of gas and oil. One time we got a video of Palestinians using one of those tunnels to smuggle a giraffe to the Gaza zoo. She went through. Poor thing, you don't want to see what they did to her. And that's sealed. And suddenly Gaza is beginning to suffocate. Adding to that, 18 months ago, my government, the Israeli government, decided to go along with an initiative by the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas of a so-called reconciliation agreement between the Palestinian Authority in Gaza. And what is this reconciliation agreement? Abbas is trying to torture the Gaza people up to a point where they would start fighting against Israel, and then he would see the two sides bleeding and he will be happy. I have no idea why our government went along with that, but since 18 months ago, we shut down power to Gaza. And Gaza, until 2 weeks ago, had only 4 hours of electric power a day. I don't know if you can imagine what it's like to live with 4 hours of electric power a day. Every family in Gaza is calculating a day. Okay, so I'm going to get up in the morning, I'm going to plug in the cell phone so I'll have a battery, then I'm going to do a washing machine, then I need to warm water for the baby because I cannot wash the baby with cold water. That's how they lived. On top of that, since May, he started to cut down their salaries. And now, Gaza has no shortage of products. Israel is supplying everything into Gaza. If you go into the market in Gaza City, you'll find everything. But people cannot afford to buy. And on top of that, there's no water. 95% of the water in Gaza are salt. You turn on the tap, you get salt water. Gaza has been drilling too much into their own aquifers. Salt water came in from the sea, and now they have salt water. Now there's a thing with the people in Gaza that they are the kind of people that find it hard to live without water. That's how they are. So Hamas has been trying to attract attention and started launching those demonstrations that we see around the border since March 30. And suddenly, our military, one of the best trained, equipped militaries in the world, is chasing kites and balloons. And suddenly, you see the asymmetry that, by the way, corresponds with most of the HLS challenges that you face in your own country, where you have magnificent technology and primitive means on the other side, and you have no solution. Apparently, we don't know how to deal with balloons and kites, and how to shoot them down. And I'm not talking about drones, which is going to be the next stage. What is the Israeli Ministry of Defense R&D budget? About $200 million, I'd say. What is the terrorists in Gaza R&D budget? You know where it lies? In DJI, China. Because DJI, $10 billion company, manufacturing drones, is creating the next generation of terrorism. And how do you deal with that? How do you compensate for this asymmetry? So we started to deal with the demonstrations with limited success. Hamas made it clear that they don't want to go into a full-scale war. And in the last 2 weeks, finally, I think there was an understanding on the Israeli side that we're going to go for some kind of understanding. First of all, allow petrol to go in with Qatar financing, bypassing the Palestinian Authority and allowing Hamas and the people of Gaza to enjoy more power. They switched in the last 2 weeks from 4 hours a day to 12 hours a day. It sounds funny to you? It's a complete difference. Imagine what it's like to live with 4 hours of power a day. You cannot even keep products in the fridge because everything rots. There's not enough power to keep things there. Now, Gaza is indeed suffocating, and that's something that our government find it hard to address. How do we look at what's going on in Gaza, and what kind of policy are we formulating? At the end of the day, I am stuck with those 2 million people, whether I like them or not, as neighbors. They live next door. You know, it's 50 minutes from here, Gaza. It's not beyond reach. It's not beyond the mountains. It's not on the moon. It's very close. And those 2 million people are locked because we decided that they're going to be locked. Yes, we withdrew from every inch of Gaza land in 2005, but when we withdrew, we told our neighbors, the Gazans, you're not going to fly anywhere via air, you're not going to sail anywhere via sea, and you're not going to travel by land through us. If the Egyptians would like to allow you to travel, feel free. We don't mind. You are not going to travel through us. And we lock them. So we need to feed those people that we locked. And every day we ship hundreds of trucks into Gaza to provide them with food, with medicine, with gas, with cement that goes to the tunnels, with iron that goes to the rockets. Why are we bearing this responsibility? Now, despite everything that we provide Gaza, this isolation has brought Hamas into its weakest point. If we look at the balance today that we are facing Israel with the decisions that we have to take today, indeed Hamas was able to produce, I'd say, I cannot give exact numbers, but I would say that they produced as many rockets as they had before the last war, more than 10,000. They've realized that they have a problem with the long-range rockets that reach Tel Aviv because they're not very effective, but they still have some of those. And they still have a few functioning tunnels because there again, Hamas is digging tunnels which cost about $1 million, $1.5 million each that penetrate into Israel. What is the Israeli response? A multi-billion-dollar project of building an underground wall with sensors that would detect the tunnels. Now, Hamas has still a few operational ones. I cannot give again the exact number that are dug into Israel, and we haven't detected them. How do we know that we have tunnels from Gaza into Israel? In Gaza, everything is done under a roof because Gaza understand that they are under constant aerial surveillance 24/7, 365 days a year. So everything they do under a roof. Sometimes they stretch sheets in the alleys so we won't see what they're doing underneath. So each of those tunnels that they build and they dig is connected into a concrete facility where they cast the plates that they use for the tunnel, and they don't want to be seen carrying the plates around on the strip and be detected from the air, so they dig a shaft from the concrete facility down into the tunnel, cast the plates, and bring them down into the tunnel. But we have been watching this concrete facility for a few months. From one side, cement goes in, no concrete is coming out. So we understand that the concrete is going somewhere else. And then we keep looking around from the air and we detect a house, and you see every morning 20, 25 people going in, every night going out. no family life in this house whatsoever, so you realize this is the digger's shaft. Sometimes you find a greenhouse. What do they use the greenhouse for? To pull out the dirt. Again, they don't want to be seen spreading the dirt that they dig out of the tunnel from the air, so they pull out the dirt into the greenhouse, and they fill the greenhouse up to here with dirt. But still, you are observing this greenhouse for 3 months, no cucumbers come out of it, so you realize that they are growing something else. So what do you know now? You know now that in Bet Hanun, row 2, house number 200, there's a shaft of a tunnel that goes in your direction. Where is the opening on our side? We have no idea. Not only we have no idea, the diggers have no idea. Because the diggers have no GPS reception under the ground. And you see that the digging is intuitive. You see it in the route of the tunnel after, because they dig, they realize that they were diverted, so they correct it, they dig again, correct it again, measure the distance, and they say, okay, I'm before the fence. There they dig several branches from the tunnel and keep them closed for the day that they're going to use it. Will Hamas be using one of those tunnels in the next few days? I suspect not. I believe that Hamas won't dare using them, but we need to take it into account, and if we will see a tunnel like that being used, I think we will be drawn into a much greater conflict with Gaza. But you see in the conflict with Gaza the asymmetry between us and them. Hamas has been firing on us since yesterday, 400 projectiles, each costs about $200. Against those projectiles, we are firing sometimes 2 per each Iron Dome interceptors, costing $500,000 each. Now, the people who developed Iron Dome would say, you cannot just measure the costs of the munitions, you need to measure the kind of damage that was prevented, because if a rocket like that falls on a house, even if it doesn't kill anyone, it destroys an apartment which costs about $200,000, $300,000 in Ashkelon, in Beersheba, other places. So we need to invest in that. And the same way goes for the tunnels, building a multi-billion-dollar underground wall to deal with those very primitive tunnels. So you ask yourself, what would be the next stage? And you realize that states, countries can never really compete against the simplicity of terrorism, especially now that the R&D of terrorism lies within civilian organizations. The development of technology occurs outside those terrorist organizations, and no matter how much you will invest in order to counter them, they will always find a way. It's like the competition between anti-tank weapons and armor. You know, as anti-tank weapons progressed, we've placed more and more layers of steel on our tanks, and we've reached a point where one Cornet missile, like the one that was fired yesterday on an Israeli bus, can penetrate 1,200 millimeters of steel. And we cannot place any more armor on our tanks because we have no engines that will be able to carry that weight of the armor. So what did we do? We went for an active protection system, trophy, Meil Ruach in Hebrew. Now, trophy is a great thing, an amazing invention, quite an expensive one, that is very effective against anti-tank projectiles, even against even against other tanks' shells. But what we will do if the next anti-tank weapon will come from a drone? We have no protection from above. We have only protection from the sides and front and back. We cannot defend our tanks from above. And how complicated is that to install an explosive device on a drone that will be able to land on a tank and destroy that? So what are we going to do next? Develop another system that would defend against them? At the end of the day, when you look at this asymmetric challenge that most countries in the world deal with this kind of level or that kind of level, this kind of sophistication or that kind of sophistication, you realize that the states, the countries are always on the losing side. They will invest huge money, but will never have complete solutions, whether it's cyber, whether it's HLS, all those challenges that we are facing, those individuals relying on civilian developed technology will always have the upper end. So the bad news here, there will not be holistic solutions. The good news for you people, there will always be demand for HLS and cyber products for protection. Thank you very much. Have a good morning.